Coming up on this episode of Radio.co.
But yeah, we were too early. Just a bit too early. Actually, Apple launched iTunes in October 2003, and I think we went into administration about 2 months previously to that.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Radio.co. Today I'm joined by Quentin Chambers. Quentin is the Managing Director of OpenLab FM. OpenLab FM is a forward-thinking electronic and alternative music radio station based in Ibiza. It was set up in 2013 by the late, great electronic composer Robert Miles. Then after his sad death in 2017, it went off air. Quentin is responsible for restarting the radio station, but not only this, he's an accomplished DJ in his own right, and he even set up one of the first online radio stations, GrooveTech.com. So absolutely thrilled to have Quentin on the podcast today. So welcome, Quentin. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. Yeah, great. So there's a lot to talk about with you, Quentin. I think, firstly, why don't we get into a bit of your personal kind of history, professional history, with setting up GrooveTech.com, because I've got here that you kind of set it up in the early noughties.
So,
right?
so GrooveTech was set up by some guys that came out of Real Networks in 1997 in Seattle, and they just set it up as a kind of hobby, kind of basement, online radio, live streaming, broadcasting from Seattle, using Real Network servers, and hosting local DJs, and it was all quite a small endeavor. They the person that started GrooveTech then approached some people in London who decided to fund it, and then they took me on in order to expand it and really turn it into sort of a viable business. And so I came in about 6 months after they started it to set up the UK division, and take the company into online retail as well as music. So we set up our UK studios and ended up having the likes of people like Andrew Weatherall and Andy C, and
wow,
amazing lineup of artists that we had. We had Colin Dale kind of doing his abstract dance show. We had, oh my God, just an incredible roster of artists, and it really was the first proper electronic music brand online actually that we created between sort of 1998 and 2003. We were just a bit early.
Yeah, because if I'm thinking back around to that time, it was kind of like DAB was starting to become a bit more of a thing, in the sense that I think it was in the early noughties, that DAB sets actually became a bit affordable for people to have in their home. And so it seems that by setting up an online radio station, you getting involved, with GrooveTech.com and those guys from Detroit setting up, it was very forward thinking, because now obviously online radio is huge.
Yes,
there's been a big explosion in that in the past 10 years or so, but you guys were really...
Yeah, at the time, there were really very, very few online radio stations. Everyone had 56K modems, and the quality obviously was difficult. The scale of the user base was pretty small, and certainly nobody had tried to kind of do it at the level that the GrooveTech did. Where GrooveTech really excelled is we built really, really amazing technology around the experience of the station. So we created archives. We on our online store, we created things like wish lists, and and this hadn't been done. Not even Amazon had created a wish list on their platform at that point. So we built a lot of functionality. Searchable by genre, all of these kind of things that people just take for granted now. We built all of that into the platform, and so created this really, supreme user experience that allowed us to really scale. And we grew up to about 100,000 regular users, which, back then was huge. In fact, still now it is pretty big for an online radio station to have that kind of audience.
Yeah, were you guys kind of coming at it from obviously the perspective of like music lovers and wanting to be able to kind of remember that particular track or that record, and kind of just using all that, like kind of what you wanted as kind of music lovers to inform like the platform, basically.
Yeah, so we built the platform in two ways. We built it one for a kind of music experience that people could tune into, live in the moment. So we had webcams in our studios. As I said, we would archive everything, so it was available on demand as well. And showcasing music from around the world, because we had a studio in Seattle, we had one in San Francisco, and we had one in London. So we were capturing a lot of really cool international talent. We started doing live streaming. We did the Detroit Music Festival there back in like 2000. So we also started doing, small amounts of live streaming from clubs as well. Probably some of the first people to do that too. And then the retail side of the business was, we had these, warehouses in Seattle and London, and we were buying music from distributors, just like a record store did, but then ingesting them, encoding them, editing clips, sticking genres onto them. And really, we were the first proper online store for electronic music in the world, really.
Wow. So you were distributing
with dual location as well. Yeah. And we were able to distribute send music from the UK to Europe and from the US into the US and South America.
That's amazing. So what happened to Groove Tech in the end?
So, we did an IPO. So we launched on the UK stock market, and we raised some money that way. And then the stock market collapsed. We had this massive tech stock market collapse in 2001. And we basically were not able to raise any more money because we were a public company. It was very hard to get funded. But by the end of when we actually went into administration, we were turning over $3 million a year, which back then was a huge amount of money for an online company. But yeah, we were too early, just a bit too early. Actually, Apple launched iTunes in October 2003, and I think we went into administration about 2 months previously to that.
Yeah, there's that thing, isn't there, that someone has a great idea, but then sometimes it's the second person that executes a great idea that makes it big.
And we were always thinking about digital and where, Napster was around, towards the end of Groove Tech's lifespan. So we were looking at digital and, but back then people were still burning stuff onto CD rather than dealing with digital files, and it was all very nascent. But we were just too early. But I learned a lot. It was quite a roller coaster. We scaled from 3 people up to 40, and a revenue of $3 million a year back then was pretty impressive.
Yeah, amazing story. Do you still have some of the archived?
Some of them are on YouTube.
Okay, cool.
I don't have any, and we had a record label. We released some really amazing albums. We did an album with Swayzak. We did an album with Weatherall, actually, and it never got released because it was just about to come out, just as we went bust, called the Haywire Sessions, and I think he ended up releasing it on a Ministries labels, I think. But yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, definitely. So what are some things that you kind of mentioned there with groovetech.com? I can see you've kind of got similar things on the OpenLab FM website, in the sense that I really like on OpenLab that you can like the tracks that you're listening to whilst listening. I mean, it's such a simple thing, and yet so many online radio stations don't have that function or capacity. You've got to kind of go into either the track list, or you've got to, and then kind of figure out which one it is, and then you've got to, or Shazam it or do something like that, or so, where you guys just keep it.
It simple. So that type of functionality actually requires you to build your own database of music. So just by you can't provide that kind of functionality unless you have your own database. So most radio stations, even that do programmatic stuff like we do, your radio software won't allow you to integrate with the user in the way. So you have to have a user login. You have to have a copy of the music database that is integrated with the database that you have. So you use Radio.co as a software, right? You have to integrate your Radio.co music library with your own music library and connect the two. So it's actually quite a technical challenge, not a very difficult one, but it is that additional layer of development that you'd have to do in order to offer that. But I mean, for us, music is the real center, and music discovery is at the center of what OpenLab do. And so having that ability to having that ability to save something to your own library, have that ability to link to Bandcamp so you can buy it. That's the kind of foundation of what we want to give our users in terms of, just a little bit more than a traditional radio station, in terms of a place that they can really discover and learn more about music.
Yeah, so let's go back to how you got involved in OpenLab FM. I've obviously mentioned that it was set up by Robert Miles, the electronic composer, in 2013. So where do you fit into this story?
So I started working with Robert in 2014.
Yeah.
I was brought in as a consultant, obviously having had a lot of experience both in online radio with GrooveTech, but also in having worked at big music distribution platforms. After GrooveTech, I started working at big online music distribution platforms, mainly in the independent sector, and became quite specialist at things like licensing and understanding content landscape, like where the rights at, which labels had which distribution, which artists with which labels. So I became a bit of an expert in terms of overall music content and digital content, and so I was brought in to help Robert with his licensing and with a general content and digital strategy for growing OpenLab into a subscription service. So I worked with him from 2014, and then sadly he started getting sick a couple of years later and died very suddenly. Well, not very suddenly. It was over 6 months, but it all happened very quickly. And just at the point where we were about to transition and raise money and take the company to the next level. So I had a lot of respect for Robert. Really loved his vision for what he was doing with the platform. I was a massive fan of its musical output. Fell in love with the station and kind of just wanted to see it continue. So I worked with a couple of the members of the team, the original team, and worked pretty hard to kind of pull the thing back together, take it out of administration and relaunch it 2 years later, which I did. We relaunched it in summer of 2019.
Wow, so how's that been? How's the relaunching been? Because it's only in 2022 now.
Yeah, and we lost a couple of years.
Pandemic.
Really.
Yeah, exactly.
We lost a couple of years. So we relaunched it in 2019. It was obviously brilliant to do. We added some features to the website. We've built quite a lot of content out. We had to stitch everything back together. We had to basically reprogram to catch up on all of the music. So there was a lot of work that went in the background to relaunch it. And then since we relaunched it, obviously then we had the pandemic that came, the beginning of 2020, which kind of, pulled back our plans quite a bit, because we were looking to start doing live events in Ibiza. We've got this amazing hub in Ibiza called Hangar 8289. That is a 4-room warehouse where we have a studio in the back, and it's a space where we can do live events and art shows and community based events, and that was closed basically over 2 years. So a lot of what we had planned to do wasn't doable. So we kind of we used that time just to grow our content. We started developing a lot of new shows. So previously to us relaunching it, OpenLab really only had a number of hosted shows, maybe one a day, and we've grown that quite considerably. So whilst we still don't see ourselves as a 24/7 live hosted platform like NTS and Worldwide and people like this, we have grown our pre-produced and even live content offering over the last couple of years.
Is the plan to get to 24 hours, 7 days a week? No.
I mean, we've toyed with the idea of maybe looking at new markets like London or LA and having slightly more traditional radio station. But actually, what we found is our users love us for our curation. They love us they want to listen to our kind of programmatic style. We do it very well. we put a huge amount of effort into curation. I personally curate a lot of the stuff that you hear on the station myself, and there's a bunch of us that all spend multiple hours a day curating music and deciding what goes into our playlisting, and it's very very considered. And it's the backbone of what OpenLab is in terms of its musical output, is the way that we curate, the way that we playlist, the way that we section that music into kind of day parts so that people really get taken on the journey of music throughout the day. And so we're not going to lose that. In fact, what we're looking to do is build out on that even more, to have multiple stations with different genres and different moods, and sort of make it's not going to be fully interactive, but it will just offer more of what people really like about OpenLab, kind of a little bit more on demand.
Yeah. So am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong, right? So am I right in thinking that you essentially have like your kind of curated playlists throughout the day?
Mm-hmm.
I know obviously you have the radio shows on demand if you go into that part of your website. And then is it kind of occasionally and sporadically you have people go live over the platform, and obviously on FM, and it's FM and Ibiza, right?
Yeah, so the FM and the website are currently linked. So it's the same experience on both. Eventually, we actually want to split that out so that we can do more localized programming. We can take on local partners in Ibiza, and it won't affect the main output of the channel, which has a global audience. So that's right. So yeah, it's programmatic curated music playlists from us using programming software for a large proportion of the day. Probably 70% of the day is programmed. And then we have about 3 shows a day that are either pre-produced or sometimes live out of our Hangar 829 studio.
Nice. And yeah, you've got some great artists and stuff that do various shows on there. What's the kind of response to OpenLab FM from artists? Do you approach musicians and ask if they want to get involved, or do they approach you? Or
it's a bit of both, really. We get approached a lot by artists asking to play, but we're pretty picky in terms of how we curate. So there needs to be an opening that fits within our programming. And a lot of the artists that we have on the platform now are because we approached them when we said, hey, we like what you do, would you be interested in working with us? That's kind of flipping a little bit now as we're kind of building the brand up quite a bit more. We're actually beginning to get approached now by artists and their managers, because they we built up relationships. We built up quite a strong creative community over the last couple of years through working with labels to feature their artists, having these regular shows where people bring in guests. So our kind of our reach has grown quite a lot within the kind of creative community that we showcase. So it's becoming a bit cyclical now.
Yeah, great. So what about your listeners? Can you tell us where they are?
So obviously, we have an FM. We have one of the only legal FMs in Ibiza, which we own and control. So we, over the summer, now we have quite a lot of people on that FM. Obviously, there's no radar in Spain, so we don't know exactly how many people are listening at any one time. But we're one of 3 stations in Ibiza that people listen to, and we capture the audience that come that are into slightly different sound to the other 2 stations, which are kind of more straight up kind of house and club music. We're definitely the alternative side of Ibiza in terms of music we program. So we have obviously chunky audience in Ibiza, and then online it's between Spain, UK, US, Holland, Italy, France. Used to be Russia, actually. Used to have quite a lot of audience there, and then a few in Asia and Australia and South America. But the chunk of our audience is Europe and the US.
Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so obviously OpenLab FM kind of is a forward-thinking radio station, and to really prove this, you guys have created your OpenLab Future Pass sale. So this is basically kind of like a NFT sale, right? Do you want to?
Yeah. So Yeah, so the Future Pass is essentially a utility NFT that sits on the blockchain. That is something that we've put together with a partner that's based in London called Token Tracks, which is setting up a kind of music-focused NFT marketplace, and it's run by some musicians and one of the ex-senior guys at Warner, and we basically, we wanted to experiment with Web3 a little bit. I've had my reservations on it, but I do think that it really does offer some quite interesting opportunity for the creative community in the way that, in the way that blockchain works, in the way that, NFTs can offer a different format for people to collect. I see NFTs as a different format. I don't believe that people will adopt this at such enormous scale that it will be so disruptive to the music industry in the next 10 years. But I think it will be something that people adopt and find a use for. And I think the technology in its transparency is something that can be, something that can be a real positive to the creative community. The other thing I like about NFTs is when they're used as a utility for access. So we're essentially, with our Future Pass, we're saying we're going to sell very limited amount of these things, and behind the pass, you'll get access to a certain amount of benefits. And that will be behind a gated wallet, so that, members of the community have access to a certain amount of exclusive content that sits behind a wall. And they also have access to the collectibles that we produce early on. So we are, obviously OpenLab, and we haven't really discussed this, but it's a music and art platform. It's not just a music platform. So our vision is really as an AV brand, which will grow out into, having a presence on television, having a presence in the metaverse. The events that we do will be very AV focused. Anybody that goes to our website will see that we feature visual art that streams, in a fairly linear fashion at the moment on our homepage alongside music, but you can dig deeper and get into features and reviews of visual artists. We have a visual artist gallery, and that's essentially how we're building our brand. It's very much going to be a combination of music and art. And so again, Web3 and NFTs is an interesting place for us to look at when we think about AV. So we're working to combine music artists and visual artists to create collectibles, which is something that we'll start offering in September. But the Future Pass is really our first step, just to start testing, to build a community around a Web3 project. And it's very small. We're looking to sell maybe 250 of these over the next month or two, and then bring about 50 creatives into the project as well within the pass, and create this kind of cyclical environment where the creatives that have the passes will also contribute to the community in terms of providing some exclusive content. And the money that we use from the pass will all go to developing the community, so the technology and the content development that sits behind it.
Yeah, it's really that in itself is just really interesting. Just if you think about the kind of sorry state in terms of how musicians get paid these days, and the fact that most of them, to make any money at all, just have to literally sing for their supper and go on tour, because I think NFT and putting people's music in them, if that's a correct way of saying it, it's just really interesting. And I think it has got a lot of potential when you think about just, that few years ago when loads of people started putting their music back on cassettes.
Exactly, you're creating that kind of scarcity with that. If you look at, some of your users might not know, but so the way that we set up the contracts with the NFTs that we're building is there's a royalty that goes to the artists, There's a small commission that goes to OpenLab, but as soon as that sale happens, that money is automatically transferred into the artist's account.
Amazing.
Now, in the traditional music industry or art business, they'll have to wait 6 months to a year for that money to filter through to them, right? There's an accounting period, there's all of this, right? So it's fairly disruptive, actually, when you think about what it's doing to the traditional model of, signing advances, long release schedules, and then even longer payout systems. By doing things on the blockchain in this way, you can actually release revenue to artists very, very quickly. So to me, it's just an interesting format, but it's also a very, very fair and transparent way to reward artists when their fans collect them.
Sorry to interrupt, but if you're enjoying this episode, then why not subscribe to our newsletter? You can get some tips, tricks, and general radio expertise direct to your inbox. Also, if you'd like to start a radio station, then you can try us for free for 7 days if you go over to Radio.co. Yeah, and music is often very kind of current. People make music of the time of that year or so, and sometimes, obviously, music comes in and out of fashion as well. Sometimes somebody makes a track or an album or so, then it kind of sounds like it belongs 3 years ago or something, and it's probably because they made it 3 years ago and it was a very of the time. So is there more of like an immediacy with like someone makes music and they can essentially get paid for it quickly and it can be released quickly?
So we're already seeing a shift from people using labels to people distributing themselves.
So with the Future Pass NFT, if you purchase one, you do get an exclusive track, right?
You get an exclusive piece of AV, which and you get 4 of them a year. We're looking to we've got our first collection of audiovisual is dropping in the middle of September. So these are collaborations between visual artists and music artists that we put together based on a concept around mycelium. And these artists are going to be producing 1 to 3 minute audiovisual works. So we've basically taken musicians from our community or people that we rate, and we've put them together with visual artists that we have featured or that we are impressed by, and we put them together to create new artworks, essentially. And we're releasing 5 of these in September. So 5 original AV pieces of art, and members of the Future Pass, 1, get access to those pieces of art early if they want them, but 2 will get an edition, a 1 of 300 edition of one of those pieces of art. And we're going to do a quarterly drop of collections, so you get 4 a year.
Cool. So am I right in thinking that would go into someone's crypto wallet?
Yes.
Is there technology within crypto wallet where you can just kind of press play and view it there?
Yes.
Right. Cool.
It's just an MP4 file.
Oh, right. That's what I was interested about.
I mean, the blockchain part of it is really the ledger that says this is yours,
right?
And that you own it, and it's attached to this wallet, and it's attached to this token.
So if someone was to bootleg it, are the consequences? So
if somebody was to get hold of the file and copy it, they would just have a copy of the file. They wouldn't have.
So what's the response? What's the response been thus far to the sale?
It's been pretty strong from people that understand crypto.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a fairly long process to onboard people that don't. But what we are getting is we're getting a lot of interest from people that don't know anything about crypto, that have been kind of looking at what we're doing and asking questions. It's as I said, we're so early into the market, and OpenLab's audience is 30 to 50 really. It's a fairly mature audience. Probably 1% of everyone that listens to OpenLab has a wallet, I would imagine. That's why we wanted to start super small.
Yeah.
And we haven't really gone on public sale yet. We're just, this week we're going to launch the ability to basically buy using a credit card. But you still need a crypto wallet, and there's still quite a lot of onboarding information that people need to digest that don't know anything about crypto.
Is there any particular information that you would like to share now in terms of people that are really new to this? Is there something that there's a misunderstanding that you wanted to clear up, or is there any?
No, I mean I think the biggest issue still with crypto is the friction. If you haven't been investing in cryptocurrency or you haven't been investing in NFTs, setting up a wallet is fairly hard work, right? And that is something that needs to improve. It needs to be much more frictionless for it to end up being something that can be mass market. But in terms of a message, no. I mean, I think this is a product that will work for some of our community that are really passionate. It's something that we want to test as a kind of cyclical business model. The interesting thing about this is that there's no middlemen, so revenue flows directly to us and it flows directly to the artists. We don't have to pay 15-30% to Apple or whatever, from normal subscription type services. But it can work exactly the same as a subscription service because it's authenticated, it's tradable, which is different. So people that pay $9.99 a month, you stop paying $9.99 a month and your subscription goes away. But you can't transfer your subscription to somebody else, right? Can't transfer that information. With this NFT, if you no longer want it, you can trade it with somebody if there's some value there. It's a fairly new model, and it's something that we're just experimenting with. It's by no way our entire focus as a company. Our focus is really to experiment with these things, but also to build out our community and to build out our distribution as well. To get into new platforms and test new platforms. I think the NFT and the Web3 side of it will form a part of our business, but I don't think it's going to be our core focus.
Well, I love what you do. I think OpenLab FM is really good. I love your creation. You're very forward thinking, and it's very exciting. So I'm going to get into the last 3 questions that we ask all of our guests. And they're basically centered around the changes that have happened in the radio industry. And I know you've dabbled in and out in the sense that there might have been like a kind of 10-year hiatus of radio. Was that what you say? Between Groove Tech coming to an end and
about 11 years.
Yeah. So you can apply a very liberal answer if you want to these questions, right? So I'll give you all 3 of them and then you can go through and answer each. So the first question is, what thing has changed in the radio industry that you wish was still the same? The second question is, what changes have happened that you are absolutely thrilled about? And the final question is there anything still happening in radio that you wish would just hurry up and die?
God, you see, no. So those questions for me are kind of a weird one because whilst I run a platform, I run a radio station. I almost don't think of OpenLab as a radio station. I think of us more of as a kind of platform, and I don't necessarily look at too heavily at what everybody else is doing and what everybody else has been doing. I kind of just quite focused on what we do, and I know where we want to go, and I know that we're different, right? So what was the first question?
What is the thing that's changed in the radio industry that you wish was still the same?
Oh, still the same. I don't know about that. I mean, I think what's clearly happened in the radio industry that's probably disrupted it the most is it going online, right? I mean, how many tens of thousands of radio stations there are in the world, but there must be. I mean, you must know this more than
there's a lot.
And with that, it to me again, that's getting into the realms of what I call the tyranny of choice, which is there's too much music on Spotify, there's too much content globally. There's not enough people that do it really, really well. And so everybody gets diluted. It's the same as, there's 100,000 tracks a day updated on Spotify or something stupid, right? And the majority of those nobody listens to. And the same, I think the same goes, with probably radio stations. There's probably way too many of them, and that takes the air out of some of the stations that probably should be doing better than they are, right? So maybe that's one of the things, scale, but that's the whole digital concept, digital content environment that I don't like. I don't like the fact that these platforms have 20 million tracks on them, and 1% of those get played. So maybe the ubiquity of the technology and how it's, whilst it enables everybody to get to build their own radio station, or DIY technology has enabled anyone to be a musician. Whether that's actually really a good thing, I'm not 100% sure.
Well, it's always going to be a mixed bag, isn't it? There's always on one hand, it's a great leveler in the sense that you can get really emerging, amazing radio stations or musicians and stuff that come up, and maybe I'm an optimist, but I think sometimes you have to hope that eventually people will kind of hone in on the good stuff.
Yeah, I think they do. And but that said, there must be thousands of stations out there that are probably amazing that I've never heard. So
yeah, but just to interrupt, this is my point for why we should have more DJs that dig, because there's so much amazing music. Like, as much as there's so many DJs and stuff, if you're discovering music that other people aren't playing and stuff, then you're doing the Lord's work, in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, that's one of the bedrocks of what we try to do with OpenLab. We try to basically unearth, and it's mostly new music that we feature, but then give people the opportunity to actually understand what that is and buy it if they want to, and save it, create a bit more of a connection with the music.
Cool. I stole your thunder there a little bit. I apologise. So what changes have happened in the radio industry that you're thrilled about? You can say nothing.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know, because I don't sit and watch, kind of read rain news religiously, or necessarily follow radio any differently to the way that I follow kind of just digital music tech stuff. Honestly, I don't know.
Okay, no worries.
Can you? What about you?
I personally am thrilled that there is now the technology that people can start their own radio stations, because it has been a leveler for a lot of people, in the sense that you've got options now, in the sense that you don't have to try and kick down the doors and try and get someone to host you on air, or get involved in the radio station if you want. And equally, you don't have to go pirate and be constantly trying to evade the authorities and not getting your transmitter taken down. And we have seen some really important radio stations that have emerged that have basically filled in the complete gaps of the radio industry having like proper diversity. So I think is the best thing that's happened.
Yeah, and I shouldn't be mean in my previous comment about whether access to all and ubiquity is not a bad thing, because, as you say, it has enabled local communities and entrepreneurs to start some really amazing creative projects, and your software and other people building this software has allowed those people to do that in a way that when we set up GrooveTech, there was no radio programming software that was integrated with the web, that you could do all of these things, right? And now you can plug these things in for £100 a month.
Yeah.
We spent hundreds of thousands of pounds building what we did, right? Because it was completely bespoke, and you don't need to do that anymore. So I think that's a very cool thing. I guess I just rail sometimes against the amount of content out there for people to sift through. I think it can be, that tyranny of choice can be quite difficult to manage for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It's something that it's kind of like that. omnipresent feeling that you're always missing out by not having watched something or seen something or listened to something. You're always kind of behind the times, and I think there's probably like a lesson from Oliver Burkeman there, in the sense that you can't do everything, and you should accept that there's a lot of important things that you aren't going to listen to and you aren't going to watch, aren't going to see. But
yeah,
we've all been there, sat in front of, the Netflix screen and spent the 2 hours allocated to watching TV looking through the options,
Oh my God. Well, I have an 11-year-old boy, and he's terrible at that.
Yeah.
Like, let's watch a movie, and then, half an hour later, you're still scrolling.
Yeah, it's awful. It's definitely awful. Sometimes it's good to go with something, just take a punt and go with something, isn't it? Final question was, is there anything still happening in radio that you wish would hurry up and die?
You know what? I mean, I don't really listen to, the only FM station I listen to is Six Music. And I love that station. Not massively happy about some of the changes they made recently in terms of their hosts and their music program, especially in the afternoon. But I still love it. And I don't really listen to anyone else. I listen to Worldwide and I listen to NTS sometimes. And so I don't really have that kind of, this is what I like about radio and this is what I don't like about radio, because I've got a fairly narrow view, to be honest.
Well, maybe that's a good selling point for online radio, is the fact that you don't then have loads of criticisms of some of the stations that have brought up all the licenses across the UK. Quentin, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. It's been a really interesting conversation. I wish I could pick your brains more about curation and stuff, but maybe
you can another time.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that another time. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Radio.co. If you enjoyed the conversation today, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Radio.co is produced by Radio.co, the platform that can bring your radio station to life. Head to radio.co/demo today to get started. We'll be back soon.